Young people have a lot of questions about our changing climate. We think they deserve answers.
For Curious Climate Schools, more than 1,000 school students from around Tasmania worked with their classes to send in their top 273 questions about climate change. Students had some great questions like these.
I was wondering if more natural disasters are going to occur due to climate change.
Is farming in Tasmania sustainable, and how has climate change impacted agriculture?
Is it too late to stop climate change?
Is it possible to reverse the damage caused by climate change?
How will climate change affect our lives?
How will climate change impact the wildlife?
What will the Earth be like when I'm an adult?
Wow, these are some big questions here.
Thank you for this question. It's one that's really close to my heart.
Great question.
I love questions like this.
The answer to that question is unequivocally yes.
We got together 57 experts to answer them, from climate scientists to conservation scientists, pyrogeographers, chemists, law experts, social scientists, engineers, psychologists, oceanographers and paleoclimatologists, even Indigenous knowledge experts and health scientists. Some of the questions asked about whether climate change is real, or how much the climate is changing, and some asked about the impacts that we're seeing in the natural world. Here's what some of our experts had to say.
Well, guys, I'm afraid it is happening and it's our fault.
In the last 10 years, most of the warming that we've seen over the entire historical period has happened over this last little period. And that's what we always expected to happen, a real ramping up as we go into the future.
Climate change and sea level rise are already affecting our wetlands. It's happening now in a wetland near you, and it's been happening for years.
Well, we know that actually some of the colder places on Earth are warming faster than other places on the Earth. So the Arctic, for instance, in the North Pole, is warming at about 3 times faster than the rest of the planet on average.
Climate change will bring on more extreme circumstances in all kinds of different forms. This can mean heat waves, bushfires, cold snaps, snowstorms, typhoons, hurricanes, huge rainfalls, and many other things.
We also got some questions that really got our experts thinking, like these.
The question is, are electric cars good if they get charged by coal-powered electricity? And this is an excellent question because an electric car, which I've got one of in my screen behind me, they're really good. They produce no carbon dioxide emissions and no global warming effect when they're being driven if the electricity that was put into them came from zero emissions or renewable electricity. If that electricity came from a coal-fired power plant, like the ones that are in Victoria, for example, that send electricity across the cable to Tasmania sometimes, then actually the emissions are quite high. And I've calculated that for an average electric vehicle that's being charged up from coal-powered electricity in Victoria, for example, the emissions, the carbon dioxide emissions, are about 25% less than an average petrol vehicle that you might drive around. So yes, they are better, but only by a small amount. And so the key message from that is electric vehicles are great if you produce new renewable electricity. And so you've got to do that at the same time as you replace petrol vehicles with electric vehicles. Thanks, Margate Primary. That was an excellent question. Go the polar bears.
Do you like to travel or have friends or family who fly regularly? If so, you probably have a strong sense that travel changed significantly due to the pandemic and has had some kind of impact on climate change. Through a combination of lockdowns, border closures, and people not wanting to risk catching COVID-19, commercial flights experienced more than 8 million less flights in 2020. You can even see the difference in air traffic before and during the pandemic. More than a year later, commercial flights are still down significantly compared to beforehand, meaning COVID-19 continues to reduce people's likelihood to travel. Now, to determine how fewer flights relates to climate change, let's look at global CO2 emissions. Added CO2 in the atmosphere is the main source driving climate change. The more we add, the more the climate will change. In 2020, we added 2.4 gigatons of CO2 less than in 2019, the largest ever recorded drop in a single year. But what's a gigaton of CO2? 1 gigaton is 1 billion tons, which is roughly 200 million elephants. So that's roughly 480 million fewer elephants worth of CO2 in the atmosphere. However, in the beginning of 2021, we have already seen a huge spike in CO2 emissions, even compared to pre-pandemic levels. That's not good. Some researchers have estimated the pandemic will only have decreased the estimated rise in temperatures by 0.01 degrees, which, while really positive, is tiny compared to the possible 1.5, 2, or even 3-degree increases in global temperatures that we're predicting.
I've had an excellent question from Peregrine School, grades 7 to 10. Essentially, the question is, I'm 13, in what way is the world going to change around me as I grow up into the future due to climate change? And what actions can I take? Now that's an excellent question. To answer this question, let's do a little bit of a thought experiment. Imagine yourself in 60 years' time. Will you have a family? What sort of housing will you live in? Will you still live in Tasmania? What will the world be like then? That's a long way to look forwards. And sometimes it's really hard to imagine the future. This is me when I was 12, roughly the same age that you are now. Can you pick me out? Yep, that's me with the groovy glasses. So if you'd asked my 12-year-old self to imagine the future, to even imagine the job that I have now, I would have struggled a little bit. But it would be good to get some clues or some tips from my future self to understand what lies ahead. So let's have a go at doing that now. We know that there are going to be some fairly severe impacts from climate change, including in Tasmania, and many of us are already seeing these impacts in our daily lives now. This includes water shortages, increased bushfires, severe weather events like thunderstorms and dust storms, new diseases showing up in Australia. For example, malaria is expected to potentially affect the northern part of Australia. Severe flooding and even infrastructure like railway lines being buckled in severe heat events. So when I was your age, when I was 12, people still smoked on aircraft. Can you believe that? Smoking on aircraft. And importantly, we had major environmental problems when I was growing up that really worried me. Acid rain was a big problem, and there was a huge hole in the ozone layer. Both of those environmental issues are now being managed very well. So my point is, as we begin to think about what the future is that lies ahead of us and ahead of you, it has enormous opportunities as well as some issues that we'll have to be very clever with how we manage them. Our cities are more likely to be greener. We might be using resource recovery, for example, taking sewage and converting that into power, electricity, but also gas for cooking. And ultimately, we may be able to have our cities give back to the environment, what we call net positive development in planning. So thank you, Peregrine School, grades 7 to 10, for this excellent question. There are some challenges that lie ahead of us, and especially that lie ahead of you as you go from 13 to, say, 63. You'll see some big changes in your lifetimes, but also there are incredible opportunities.
All the experts felt that it was really important to answer young people's questions about climate change. Why? Lots of reasons, but mainly because climate change is something that younger generations will have to deal with for their whole lives. Dr. Philippa McCormack, who's an expert in climate adaptation law, told us why she wanted to answer students' questions.
I'm Philippa, and I have my own kid who has questions that are big and complicated and important. And I know from her that when kids get to ask the questions that are rattling around in their brains, and if grown-ups take those questions seriously and give them a proper, thoughtful answer, then young people and kids get the chance to apply their clever, creative brains to the issues that they care about the most. I'm really excited to see where our young people take this curious climate project. And I want to be part of the world that they make as they grow and learn.
So why are we thinking about this right now? Well, as we speak, the world's leaders are meeting in Glasgow for the United Nations COP26 Climate Summit. This is a meeting where all the countries of the world discuss targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions with the aim of trying to limit climate change to less than 2 degrees Celsius of warming. They've also pledged to do everything possible to keep climate change to below 1.5 degrees Celsius, considered a safer level of warming. We'll find out what they managed to agree in the next 2 weeks.
There's really no other issue that our politicians deal with that poses real existential threat to the future of our planet. Think about that for a moment. This is the one issue, more than species extinction, more than other forms of pollution, more than pretty much any other environmental issue. This is the thing that could actually end life on Earth. And that is a mind-bogglingly profound burden to place on decision makers today to take action. The other reason why I think it should be a political priority is because it has such significant justice and equity dimensions for future generations. This is a situation where only if we take action and take a little bit of pain now will we spare future generations the pain that we're inflicting as a consequence of climate change. That makes it a very difficult political question, but it highlights just how important it is.
Learning about climate change can make you feel all kinds of emotions, and these are something that climate change experts also struggle with sometimes. Feelings can be a signal that something's wrong or needs our attention, and they can also be really motivating. They can help us find out what we're passionate about. Our feelings can help us learn how to take care of ourselves, others, and our planet. You might find it useful to talk to other people who have similar thoughts and feelings about climate change. And you can even find ways to help each other work for a safer climate.
Ultimately, climate change is a global issue that we need governments, businesses, and industries all over the world to work together to address. But each one of us can make a difference too. We can help by taking individual action, working together to take collective action, and by calling for larger scale systemic change, for example, by governments and world leaders. Small actions can add up to big changes and positive impacts. And it actually feels good when we're doing something constructive, working together with others that care about the same things as we do, and actively being part of the solution.
By working together, we can combine our efforts and influence to achieve change and progress faster. Find your tribe and use your voices. Get together with friends and other students who care about climate action.
And use your talents. Are you a great artist? Then draw or paint about climate action. Are you good with social media? Well, then you can use your influence to get climate action happening. Do you like to cook? Well, then perhaps offer to make a delicious vegetarian meal for your family.
Lastly, we probably can't all do all the possible actions against climate change all the time. Just remember that that's okay, because what we really need is lots of people doing lots of things lots of the time to try to help together. Remind yourself and other people to feel really good about whatever changes and actions that you're taking. Go you!
My name is Kim Beasy and I work at the School of Education in the University of Tasmania, and I've been a part of the Curious Climate Schools project, and I must say I'm so excited that this resource has been put together and will be available for our Tasmanian teachers to share with their students in classrooms. So you'll find authentic questions that have been submitted by young people from grade 5 all the way through to grade 10, asking their questions about climate change, which behind the scenes we've been organising and have organised experts to respond to these questions, which are now available in video or written form. It's just such a great resource to integrate into classrooms, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we do.
Head over to curiousclimate.org.au/schools to find out lots more about climate change and what we can all do about it.